In order to get into medical school, you're going to need to ensure that you've completed several requirements during your undergrad education. So today, I'd like to give you some information on medical school prerequisite courses, or prereqs, the rationale behind these courses and why you have to take them, and some tips and suggestions for optimizing your performance in your pre-med education. First, hi, I'm Dr. Sarah Klebe, and I'm an admissions expert at BeMo Academic Consulting. So what are medical school prerequisites? These are courses that many medical schools require students to take as part of the admissions criteria. That is to say, in order to be considered as an applicant, you have to complete these courses, you have to receive a passing grade in them, and that is part of your overall application package to med school. They look at whether or not you've completed these courses and whether or not you've done so successfully. So there are some schools that don't have prerequisite course requirements. Some schools will make these prereqs suggested courses to complete. So even if you haven't completed them, if you're applying to one of those schools, you'll still be considered. So it's really important that you look through each school's website really thoroughly, or even better, speak to their admissions office so that you're sure that you have the most up-to-date information regarding these prerequisites. They can change from year to year, so it's not safe to just rely on maybe what you heard was required this past year or a few years ago. You need to make sure that you have the most up-to-date information, and the only way to do that is to consult the school as well, or someone who specializes in gathering that kind of information and keeping it up to date. And do note, I said some schools have requirements. Some of them have these prereqs as just suggested as opposed to actual requirements. We would still encourage you to complete all of them before you apply. By doing so, it demonstrates that you've really looked carefully at their admissions criteria and taken into account their suggestions for what courses you need to complete. Remember, at every stage of the applications process, the specific thing that you're doing to get in isn't the entire picture. Right? So if you look at a list of suggested requirements, or suggested courses, we'll say, and say, well, it's just suggested, I don't really have to worry about that, that's not necessarily going to look great on your application, right? They're going to see that when you have the opportunity to challenge yourself, you don't. And you may have very valid reasons for doing so. Everyone carries a heavy load during undergrad. You may have a lot of really difficult courses that you're struggling with, and none of that is invalid, of course. And certainly this isn't the one thing on which your entire application rests, but you should be mindful of what the decisions that you make demonstrate about yourself and your motivation. So please bear that in mind. An example of some of the most common required courses are things like having 2 semesters of biology with lab experience, 2 semesters of chemistry with lab experience. Some schools might only require, say, organic chemistry, or maybe allow you to substitute a biochem course for a chemistry course, while some are going to require both inorganic and organic chemistry courses. So there's no one simple rule that applies across the board here. So again, do make sure that you clarify what the expectations are of each school that you're applying to. Again, often they'll require 2 semesters of physics with lab experience, at least 1 semester of math. Again, only certain kinds of math courses are acceptable, so you may need to look into that further. Some may ask for statistics, some may ask for calculus, some may ask for algebra. It just depends. And a lot of schools will also require you to have 2 semesters of English, which is maybe not something that you recognize as immediately relevant to the work that you're going to do, but it absolutely is, and I'll explain why in just a moment. So why do they make you do these prereqs? In particular, you know that say one of the schools requires you to take anatomy, and you know you're going to have to take anatomy once you're in med school, obviously. Well, some of it is about building foundations and developing a solid knowledge base. When you become a medical doctor, you have to have a broad knowledge base and a solid grounding in multiple subjects in order to be an effective physician. And there's only so much time in the world. While something like, say, anatomy or physiology is certainly something that could be covered in your undergrad and might be required by some schools, they're still going to be covered extensively during your medical education. And schools want to know that applicants have at least that foundational knowledge of subjects that either can't be covered completely in your actual medical school program, or that have to be already sort of building on an established knowledge base because of those time constraints. Any physician, regardless of specialization, is going to need a solid grounding in math and physics to practice in a number of different specialties, whether it's internal medicine to radiation oncology. And something like English, or even maybe a social sciences course like sociology, that might not seem immediately relevant. But, with regard to English courses, when you're a physician, you're going to have to write and communicate effectively every single day. You're going to have to break down really complex knowledge and make it comprehensible to non-specialists. And those English courses are going to help you be able to do that. And then, of course, the science courses, that is just going to give you that fundamental basic grounding in the sciences that you're going to need and that you're going to build on as you continue through medical school. Another reason for prerequisite courses is the development of critical thinking skills. Remember, once you get to that level of education where you are going through medical school, you can't rely on simple rote memorization anymore. You need to be able to demonstrate that you're a critical thinker, that you're a self-learner, that you can engage in your own self-assessment and succeed in those courses that require that kind of skill or quality. So critical thinking skills are crucial to your success, both as a medical student and as a physician. And a lot of physicians continue taking advancing their education even after they've earned their degree, in order to continuously self-assess their skills, their abilities, and strive to always continue improving their performance. So your performance in those kinds of prerequisite courses that force you to build up your critical thinking muscles, those are going to help you display those skills that the medical school's admissions committees are looking for. Sorry. Another thing to bear in mind is that courses that require you to do that kind of critical thinking are going to be really helpful when it's time for you to take the MCAT, right? Especially the critical analysis and reasoning section, which a lot of students panic about. It is notoriously challenging, and it's challenging for anyone, whether you've developed critical thinking skills or not. It's meant to be very challenging. But if you're taking courses that require you to do that kind of critical investigation, you're going to be all the more prepared for that important hurdle that you have to pass. Another reason for these prerequisites is the ability to manage your time and your stress. They want to be able to see that you can be successful while constantly juggling and balancing a variety of courses, along with your extracurricular activities, any volunteering you might do, and all of those other things that factor into your application. Again, as a physician, you're going to take part in a number of different activities, not just constrained to clinical practice or teaching students. You may be doing administrative work, research work, things like that. You're going to be working long hours, and the medical schools need to see that you can effectively manage your time and handle the stress that comes with this heavy load of courses, so that they know that you have the necessary sort of self-preservation skills, which include time management and stress management to succeed in medical school. So being able to manage competing priorities, juggle a variety of tasks, taking tests, writing essays, doing lab reports, and doing all of them well, and maintaining your GPA, and also keeping your own stress in check, all of that is going to demonstrate that you can carry the heavy load that's coming in medical school. So do make sure that if you haven't already, you're already incorporating some de-stressing techniques into your everyday life, exercising, making sure you're practicing good sleep hygiene, finding time to spend spend with friends and family so that you don't start burning out before you've even really gotten started. Next, I mentioned this earlier very briefly, but it's worth putting a spotlight onto it. All of this, your prereqs, as well as electives that you might take, will help for your MCAT preparation. Most medical schools require the MCAT, and to do well, you need to have a background in certain subjects, and often those are subjects highlighted as prereqs by these universities. So the MCAT, if you don't know, it certainly tests your critical thinking abilities. You can't just memorize or regurgitate facts in order to do well on it, but overall you need a solid foundation of biology, chemistry, physics, statistics, English, and at least one social science like psychology, sociology, something like that. So again, even if the med school that you're applying to doesn't have specific required prerequisites, but if they do require the MCAT, you should go ahead and make sure that you're completing courses that are also going to function as MCAT Prep so that you have the required background knowledge to do well and succeed there. So some quick tips and tricks that you can use so that you're not just passing these prerequisite courses, but doing well in them and taking care of yourself along the way. One thing to always bear in mind is that, of course, these classes are going to apply to your overall GPA if they're not directly in the sciences, or to your science GPA for those that are in the sciences. So you really need to aim to really do well and get the most out of each of these courses. So some ways that you can maximize your performance: first, create a plan and do so as early as possible, understanding that there might need to be some modifications along the way. You need to think very strategically about the courses that you're going to take and when you're going to take them, which I'll touch on more in just a minute. Certain majors will have prerequisites included in their list of studies and list of programs, so you can look through that to make sure that you're planning everything well in advance and then have time to actually do all of it. And then for other programs, you may have to plan your schedule just accordingly based on what's offered. So be aware in doing this, you might need to use some of your electives to be able to fulfill these requirements. You may have to do some work during the summer to meet these requirements. That's just the nature of time, because of course, you don't want to overload yourself. You don't want to be taking 6 courses in one term and 4 of them being really difficult. That's not going to help you. That's going to stress you out. That's going to end up with you burning out, and it's going to likely end up with you not doing as well as you could if you had planned a little more effectively. So plan a proposed course schedule for the first 2 years of your undergrad program during your final semester at high school, if possible, if you're at that stage, making sure that you're completing both degree requirements and med school prerequisites as part of that. If you've already started your pre-med education and you're in university, if you haven't put a plan like this together yet, go ahead and do it now. It's ideal to do this as early as possible, of course, but you shouldn't just not do it at all if it means that if you haven't already gotten started on it yet. It's never too late to start a plan if you haven't already. Another tip, and this is what I was referring to earlier, make sure that you understand the difficulty level of each course and spread that difficulty out effectively so that you're not taking all of the difficult or really time-consuming prereqs in 1 or 2 semesters. Spread them out evenly across those first 2 years so you have a good mixture of courses so you can give the proper amount of attention to each course. You know yourself better than anyone else. You know what is going to burn you out. You know what's going to push you down rather than pushing you up. So make sure that you are finding a schedule that works best for you, that allows you to spread some of the difficulty out so that you're not just drowning in 1 or 2 semesters. Number 2, another tip, finish your prerequisites in a timely manner. As you should be aiming to finish these prerequisites ideally by the end of your 2nd year of undergrad. Even though you're not going to be applying to med school usually until your 4th year, aiming for an earlier deadline gives you a little bit of leeway during that 3rd year if everything doesn't quite go according to plan. Like I said, a plan is wonderful and you want to try to establish one, but things don't always go the way that we intend them to go, right? An ideal result is a very rare thing sometimes. So If you aim to complete them all during the first 2 years and something just doesn't work out, then you have a little bit of wiggle room in that third year so that you can take care of things. Or if, something unexpected comes up, a health crisis or a personal crisis that leaves you having to take time away from school for a little bit, again, you'll have that time in the third year to really fill in any gaps that might have existed. Number 3, make sure that you're studying effectively. Making sure that you're getting the best grade possible in each prerequisite course has to be a priority. These contribute towards your overall GPA, right? So even if it's something like an English course where you don't feel it's entirely relevant to what you want to do, or maybe it's just not your thing, you're a sciences person all the way and don't really get into the humanities all that much, that doesn't mean that you can just blow it off. That would be a really unfortunate thing because it would harm your GPA, of course, but also because courses like English, or even if you were to use an elective to look at philosophy or something like that, those are courses that contribute to your overall well-roundedness. They're going to give you new ways of thinking about just the world around you. And things like that can actually be really useful when you get to the application stage of medical school, when you're having to write personal essays or secondary essays and really reflect and introspect on the things that have developed you up until this point and that make you who you are and why that person is a strong candidate for the program. So in studying as effectively as possible, use your calendar or a planner to take notes about dates for things like midterms, finals, due dates for big assignments, and block off time in your calendar each week to make sure that you're devoting that time throughout the semester and not just leaving studying and assignments until the last minute. I know pushing things to the last minute is kind of just what a lot of undergrads do. And I'm certainly, I was as guilty of it as anyone else when I was an undergrad, but it's just not the most effective way to do things. It causes you more stress than necessary. It doesn't give you time to really go back and check your work. It certainly doesn't give you time to internalize and start passively processing that information. So create blocks of study time devoted to each course. Really focus on that around the week or two before things start getting really heavy in terms of assignment loads and exams and things like that, and stick to that schedule as effectively as you can. And importantly, make sure when you're scheduling time to study that you're also scheduling break times and that you stick to those. So for every hour's worth of work, take at least a 5 or 10 minute break to stretch, walk around, talk to a friend, do whatever you need to do to sort of just de-stress, decompress, return with fresh eyes on whatever it is you are working on, ensuring that you feel refreshed, energetic, and ready to focus. And also, if you do find yourself struggling with the course material when you're doing these prereqs, please do seek help from your professor during office hours, or if you have TAs, speak with them as well. Professors are more than happy to point you in the right direction in terms of study strategies, as well as resources that you need to help you feel more comfortable with the course material. As someone who has taught in higher ed for a long time, I can tell you, sitting in my office for 3 hours with no students coming in is really boring. I find other things to work on, of course, when I was doing that, but few things make professors happier than when students actually come and talk to them during office hours and want to discuss how to genuinely, effectively maximize their studies and do as well as possible in the course. So if you get informed about whichever prerequisites are necessary to complete prior to medical school. By planning ahead, you're going to be able to complete these prereqs and do well, which will help you along your journey to medical school by maximizing your GPA, helping you prepare for the MCAT, ensuring you have a solid foundation in place as you take that next big step, and also demonstrating your commitment to the admissions committee, who will be reviewing all aspects of your application, including the prereqs that you've taken. So I hope that you enjoyed this video and that it was helpful. If so, please do go ahead, like it, share it with a friend who might benefit from it. Please do be sure to subscribe to our channel on YouTube, follow us on Facebook, and look for us on a variety of other social media platforms. Feel free to comment below with any questions you might have, and I'll get to them as soon as possible. If you'd like us to help you, click the link to our main website that should appear either above or below this video, and click Get Started Here to see all of our programs and schedule a free consultation. We'll set you up with one of our admissions experts to answer any questions you might have and get you started on your preparations. We have programs to suit any of your needs, and we are happy to work with you to determine which plan will support you most effectively. As ever, thank you so very much for your time. Take good care, and I'll see you next time.